welcome to the last day of Shop Talk. My name's Calypso Rose, and I'm director of the Inditute, and we curate workshops and talks all across London, and we've curated the last 3 days of Pulse's Shop Talk. When the Imperial War Museum reopened in 2014, this family of 5 museums across the country also reinvented their retail offering. The team collaborated with artists and designers sourcing the unique and the contemporary. They don't sell souvenirs, they sell brilliant gifts to make their shops unique. They even took the Imperial War Museum on the road to a pop-up in Covent Garden. To discuss collaboration and how to make retail cutting edge, we have brought the team to Shop Talk. We've got Katie Law, Deputy Editor of the London Evening Literary Editor of the London Evening Standard and writer of Design Spy, who will be chairing the talk. David Fenton, Head of Retail, Publishing and Licensing, joined the Imperial War Museum 3 years ago after working in fashion retail for 25 years, half of that at Liberty, where he was Head of Fashion. And then we have Laura Mullins, is the Buying and Merchandising Manager, who moved from the Science Museum and now manages the retail for 8 different shops within the group. Over to you, Katie.
Thank you very much, Calypso, and thank you, all of you, for coming this morning, and thank you to David and Laura. And I'll start by saying, on a personal note, that if you haven't actually been to the Imperial War Museum recently, you really are missing a trick, because I thought I'd better get on and do some homework, and I went and visited it, and I went to see the Lee Miller exhibition at the same time, and I was absolutely blown away by the shops, and they haven't paid me to say that, I absolutely promise. But let's start, David, with you, and tell us a little bit about all the different shops you have and how they've sort of come into being and where they all are.
Morning, everybody. Yeah, Imperial War Museum started its life in 1917, sort of tail end of the First World War, and we've grown now to 5 branches, as Calypso pointed out. You can see on the screen there we have 2 free branches. So in the top left, you see our Lambeth Road Main Museum and Imperial War Museum, London. On the right-hand side at the top there is Imperial War Museum North, which is in Manchester. It's our other free museum. The other 3 museums, charging museums, you've got at the bottom here a ship on the Thames, HMS Belfast. And the middle there you see IWM Duxford, which is an aviation museum near Cambridge. It's an ex-RAF base, very well used during the Second World War. And then on the bottom right-hand side, you can see the Churchill War Rooms, or the Cabinet War Rooms, where Churchill led with his cabinet during the Second World War, which is a really iconic place. So we have a family of 5 museums. Within the museums, we have 8 shops across all of the different sites, 4 based at Imperial War Museum London. And then we also sell online. We have an online shop. And we also trade sell our retail IWM products as well. So that's us.
Okay, thank you. And one of the things that seems very obvious is that being the Imperial War Museum, there's potentially something rather difficult about selling merchandise that relates to something as sensitive as war. And I wondered, Laura, if you can tell us a little bit about how you handle choosing what to sell, what not to sell, and how to do it.
Yeah, sure. Hello. So we're quite careful in what we select. We talk to lots of people, and basically we do our homework. Making war commercial is obviously quite a difficult thing, but when you look at what the actual museum is trying to say, and that it's not a military museum, it's a social history museum, there's actually an awful amount of content we can use. So we don't really focus on, I suppose, guns and things. We try to focus on the stories around war itself. So we have ranges on aviation, make, do, amend, fashion. And when you start delving into it, there's actually a massive amount of content we can use. So occasionally we will be selling toys that the packaging might change, for instance, as happens from toy manufacturers. And if the packaging is overtly aggressive, we will take it off sale, even if it's a really important line to us. We're not afraid to do that. We actually, considering our turnover, which has grown quite a lot over the recent years, especially since the museum was relaunched, we've had very few complaints, and I think that's because we make sure we ask questions and we make sure we do our homework, and yeah, like I said, we don't seem to have offended too many people, and I think we are very sensitive about the subject, and that's why.
Can you, either of you, can you tell us a little bit about some of the specific ranges and how you come to choose them? One example I was thinking of is the Luck and Love in the First World War.
Yeah, this is an example of how we range. We try to bring stories from our collections into the shops. So in the First World War, soldiers carried keepsakes, obviously for luck, because they're obviously going into war, into battle. So we've taken this idea and made actual replicas of those keepsakes. And tried to tell the story of luck and love. We do other things, so for instance here we've got Make, Do and Mend, so again we'll take things from the collection. We've used the utility stamp for clothing behind this, and we might take inspiration from a vintage dress, the pattern on that might come through to a wash bag or a mirror or something like that, and we try and build stories around these.
And who in these ones specifically, who is doing the designing? Where did these, are you?
Well, we commission an awful lot of design work, actually. We take things from the collection and then we commission other designers. We do have an in-house design team, and occasionally, when they're not working on exhibitions, they'll do some retail work. But we actually try to work with people, a wider kind of group of designers. So we're just constantly looking. So we'll go to things like new designers. We'll go to...
Guys, take note.
We'll go to trade shows. We'll go online. We'll go to illustration fairs. So always looking for new people.
Okay, and you've just had your big refurbishment, and we're going to flip back now to that. Tell us about that and how you decided how to do it, and what's what and what's where.
So yeah, we had a fantastic opportunity within Imperial War Museum because in 2014 we had the commemoration of the start of the First World War, and on that, in that period, we were redeveloping the Imperial War Museum, Lambeth Road, the main museum there, and it's a £42 million spend on redeveloping the central atrium that you see in the picture there, and also the First World War galleries. So we took that opportunity to redevelop the retail spaces, and we have 4 retail spaces in that particular site. We really worked on a retail strategy that saw us wanting to say something with our retail shop fit that really kind of established as a bit of a kind of almost a retail brand within the Imperial War Museum. So we brought in an outside designer called Drinkle Dean, who's worked very much in the sector and has also particularly worked in the retail area within museums, and really sort of established a template within Lambeth Road, within the main museum as part of this, that we could then take forward to across all of our other sites. And of our 8 shops, we've now refit 7 of those shops up to recently. So we've been very, very busy, but I think the shops have really established, in combination with the product ranges and the retail as a brand, and really looking at how visitors want to experience the shops within the museums when they go there, sort of raising the standard and raising the bar. There were things that we really needed in there. They needed to be long-serving in terms of how long we could use these shops for. The flexibility that we have within those shops is a really key thing for us. But just to give the retail aspect an authority, something that really matched the experience that people felt around the rest of the museum when they were going there.
Do you think it's true to say, either of you really, that museum retailing has had to really change, as it were? I mean, Claire Hastings from the Institute was saying just now that apparently we're all going to be shopping, according to the talks that have been taking place yesterday. We're all going to change the way we shop. So this is a huge challenge for museums to offer something that's really going to appeal to sophisticated audiences.
Yeah, I mean, I think just in general terms, retail is changing quite dramatically, and I think in museum retail world, I would be honest and say that I think some parts of the museum world and visitor attractions have been slow to kind of pick up on some of these changes. So it was a key part of myself coming into this sector from outside the sectors was that actually we became more commercial. The grant and aid dropping is really key that we are able to deliver more money back to the museum so the museum can continue what it's doing. So there has been a real change in terms of attitudes within museums as to what is commercial and what they can do with it. But conversely, I think that idea of what customers want from that retail experience has changed quite dramatically as well. People now go to gift shops within museums and they don't just want a rubber or a pencil. They want more than that. They want something that they're actually going to take away with them that reflects the experience that they've had as they've been walking around the museum. So there's definitely been quite a change there, I think.
And can you talk us through some of your best-selling ranges? What sells, what doesn't sell, and what customers expect beyond the rubber and the pencil?
Yeah, I mean, we have quite a wide range of products in the shops, which I think would surprise a lot of people. Our top-selling range, so to speak, is Aviation. It's always consistently a really strong seller across all of our 5 sites, but obviously at IWM Duxford, which is an aviation museum. But 20% of our sales are aviation-themed across all of our sites. Spitfire within that is the most popular part of aviation. It's an iconic plane. We have a really strong connection to the Spitfire in terms of our history with IWM Duxford, being one of the first places that the Spitfire flew from. And I think it's a plane that just resonates with our audience, and people love it. We didn't find the depth of product that we needed within that particular subject, so we've actually done a lot of product development. Laura and the team have done an amazing amount of product development with designers looking at how we can sort of communicate the Spitfire and use the Spitfire. And just in terms of changes as to what people would not expect to see in a museum, is on the left-hand side there, we have a model Spitfire that's £580. Again, people don't expect to come to a gift shop in a museum and see something at that price level, but that's been hugely successful, surprising to us even how many of those we've sold across all our sites and at Duxford.
How big is it? I know, I'm just fascinated by this. Who's buying it? What sort of people will buy that? When we talked on the telephone, you mentioned that you can also buy an experience of actually going in a real Spitfire, and so that there's a sort of tie-up that people might want to buy this.
You can go to RAF Duxford and you can get in a Spitfire for half an hour, and all you've got to pay is £3,000. So if anyone's got £3,000 to spend, and then when you've had your flight, you can go into our shop and spend £580 on a model.
Which is nothing, really.
And to some people that do go there, it really isn't. But we also sell these in London where you've not gone on a Spitfire, you've just seen one hanging from the wall, the ceiling. So, but international visitors as well are very keen, and obviously we've got the online shop so that they can purchase when they go home.
I think there was another range, an image there as well, which is from a First World War poster called Victory is in the Kitchen. Again, this sort of coincided with the period of time we were looking at more range and more depth of ranges around our First World War galleries reopening at London. And we came across this poster and we looked at it and thought this is a really contemporary look, and you would never think something like that came from the First World War period. And obviously, from what's written on the poster, it lends itself really strongly to kind of kitchen and cookery and homeware ranges, which has now been a fantastically strong seller for us as well.
And you mentioned a bit earlier, in terms of the process and how you come up with the products, is that you actually commission and work on things with individual designers and artists. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about how that works, the whole process.
Yep, sure. We've got a few slides as well. So I'm going to show you a couple of slides on remembrance. The theme of remembrance is obviously really important to us. It's not. It's probably around 15% of our sales, and obviously that ramps up towards the autumn when you've got Remembrance Day coming up. But what we really wanted to do was make sure we have ranges that cover the subject fully. So we've got ranges on poppies. Poppies are obviously always linked to remembrance, but they're not. It's not the only thing that remembrance is about, and that's why we've developed this range here. So we commissioned an artist called Julia Mackenzie to develop this range, and she took a bag in our collection, a small bag that was embroidered by a soldier who was convalescing in the First World War. So he embroidered a bag, and she took the detail from the bag and worked it into a fairly contemporary illustration. And so that's a classic example of how we try to use the stories from our collection and rework them into modern product. Another example of Remembrance is this, and this is a collaboration between us and Royal Mail, so it's actually a license that we did. And we sought this out because we could see the strength in the stamp, and this commercially has been a brilliant success, especially with our trade partners as well. So gift shops across the UK around the time sold this extremely well. But we range review just like a high street retailer would. So we work a year to 18 months in advance. We know which ranges we want to focus on. And so at that point, we start thinking about who we want to work with. And sometimes that comes from approaches, or sometimes we go and find what we need.
And one collaboration in particular that's rather unusual and interesting, which I'd like you to tell us about, is the one that you've done with Paternity, based on, well, you'll tell us the whole story about it.
Yeah, and this again is trying to do things a little bit that people wouldn't maybe expect from the Imperial War Museum, and this is very much, you know, a theme you'll see through quite a few of the things that we're talking about today. One of the really exciting ones was around the period again of the centenary of the First World War and the reopening of the museum. So we came across a concept called Dazzle, which you may or may not have heard of. Wasn't really that widely well known, but it was actually a camouflage concept that was used during the First World War on ships, to try and manipulate the eye of the enemy. So they would look at the ship and be confused about where the centre of the ship was, for instance. But when you actually look at the design concept of that, there was something really quite contemporary and quite unusual about that. So we spoke to a company called Paternity, who are sort of leading pattern specialists based in Shoreditch, and developed a range of 10 products with them called Fleet of Dazzle. It really is something people wouldn't expect to see from us, and we've had fantastic kind of profile changing because of doing a range like this. We've got press in the New York Times, Elle Decor, you know, and it's something, again, people have really kind of responded quite well to in a really sort of contemporary way, using something that's also based in history. So we think it was a really important range for us to do, and it was a real sort of leading range for us.
I think it's particularly clever the way you've managed to transpose the pattern, the basic pattern, onto things that are relevant for a modern audience. And I wonder, David, with your experience at Liberty's working in menswear and fashion, how you think you've brought your eye, as it were, to this sort of thing. Do you think that's become very important?
Yeah, I mean, it was. I came from a fashion background. Had never really worked with gift or anything like that before I came to the Imperial War Museum, and didn't particularly have an interest in that subject either. So it was quite a sort of learning curve when I first started. But I definitely think the background that I brought from working at somewhere as iconic as Liberty and so sort of visually led as Liberty really helped me in my sort of movement into a new category. And sometimes you've just got to really trust your gut and your attitude in terms of whether you think it's the right kind of product. But I also think there was a huge part of learning from our subject, but also learning from who our audiences are and who our visitors are. You know, these are people who are shopping on the high street, and I know the kind of things that they were buying at Liberty and they were looking at. And so I think it was sort of trying to just bring these things forward. And again, going back to not necessarily having the product that people would expect in a museum gift shop, which is rubbers and pencils and pens. Mm.
And also thinking about the World War I and the centenary, most people, if you just ask them in the street, would just say, "Oh, poppies." And you alluded to this a bit earlier, but I wondered what other ways you had found, Laura, that you could commemorate the First World War that goes beyond the poppies.
Yeah, so obviously, the museum has relaunched new shops. We developed about 50% new ranges, and some of these we wanted to mark the centenary. So we had new Remembrance Ranges, which I showed you before. We did the Dazzle range with Paternity, and that was a profile builder, and that worked extremely well for us. And then I think this is probably one of my most favourite ranges I've ever done, but we worked with the artist Bob and Roberta Smith. We looked for an artist to work with because we really wanted to ask questions around the First World War and make people think. And we thought commissioning an artist was the way that we could do this, and it would be something different. So we approached several artists. We've got lots of contacts in the museum, and we hold a large art collection anyway. Not many people know it, but the Imperial War Museum holds the second largest art collection to the Tate, so a lot of that's wall posters, so not as much fine art, but we have a large kind of resource there to use. So yeah, we approached a few artists, but there was one that stuck out, and that was Bob and Roberta Smith, and that's Bob there. He's a fantastic man to work with, really open, and it was a kind of joy to work with him. The reason he stuck out is because of this painting here, which hangs permanently in the Tate Britain. So make art, not war. So he was already doing political work. So he was obviously quite perfect to work with. And he jumped at the chance. So he came in and he worked with our historians and our curators and really had some debates with them, saw our art store, looked at the collections, and he came up with this wonderful concept, which was, how do we understand 1914 to 1918? So we're really trying to make people ask the question, how do we understand? And there are still questions around the First World War that haven't been answered, and there's still historians debating things around it. So it was the perfect question to ask. And the idea behind this product, which is a button that's made in Birmingham by Fenton, who make military buttons to this day, is that people would wear it and it would actually ask them to question. So rather than a poppy, which is asking people to think and remember, this is actually asking people to question what war's about. We also did this painting, which is called The Lost Artists, and you can see from the dates on this painting that everybody on here died during the First World War, and they were all extremely young. So they weren't just artists, they were composers, writers, and they were from across Europe and America. So we're not just talking people from this country, we're talking about German people as well. So it's really asking people what war does, and two things came out of that. It pushes creativity along. We all know that a lot of the inventions and the machine age kind of came out of war, but it also, obviously, these men were all killed and they were all creatives, and it's asking the question, what might have been if they hadn't been? So I think the reason I love this so much is because he was perfect. He understood the brief so well, and he was joy to work with, and it really did exactly what we wanted him to do.
Thank you. Coming to what's probably the most important time of the year in retail for everybody, Christmas. How do you handle that? Is that something that changes year to year? And what's your take on Christmas at the shop?
Well, we always do a Christmas range. Obviously, we've got a lot of gift anyway, but we always do Christmas. I don't have... I've got a picture of the pop-up, but I don't have a picture of our Christmas range. We generally theme it around a First World War or a Second World War Christmas, and generally a Second World War Christmas does better than a First World War Christmas. But, yeah, we try and bring in things like stories like Make, Do, Amend, and I think that really works, kind of making your own Christmas and bringing traditions from the past. So we select a range of lovely things from people around here that we bring together to make a nice range. But Christmas isn't... the museums themselves go quite quiet in the lead up to Christmas. We're quite busy in the week between Christmas and New Year, when everyone's on holiday. So we actually focus, from a buying strategy, we focus on the summer. Spring and summer are much more important to us commercially. So, but this Christmas we did something a bit different. So,
well, do you want to talk us through that?
Yeah, I think what Laura's alluding to is that obviously with Christmas being a quieter time for us in the museum, we actually took the opportunity to work with one of our brand licensees called Realm and Empire to do a pop-up shop in Covent Garden and Seven Dials. Again, this was a challenge for us. It's not something we'd really done before, but more museums are starting to do pop-up. They're starting to go outside of their museum branches to actually look at new ways of retailing. And this was a great opportunity for us. This was a brand licensee. They're a men's fashion brand that already worked quite closely for the last sort of 4 or 5 years with the Imperial War Museum. And they go into our archives, they look very deep into the archives and use the archives and the content that they find to help inspiration for the designs that they do. So there's a really great link with us there. They were really keen to do this pop-up shop. So we had about 30% of the shop was retail gift from the Imperial War Museum. And we were really, really happy with how that turned out. We had a fantastic response from the people who visited the shop, and I think for me the most interesting thing was that people were coming in who hadn't been to the Imperial Museum either before or hadn't been for 10 years and were really engaging with it again, surprised that they would see something like this, and were actually saying to us that they really wanted to have a look at the museums themselves and come back and have a look at the retail as well. So it was a great sort of positioning thing for us to do, and again slightly unexpected for us, and worked really, really well.
And would you say that this is in part, at any rate, the way forward for you, that you'll be doing more such such ideas, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, again, the same as the high street. We have to keep challenging, we have to keep moving, we have to keep doing new things. We cannot stop. We have 8 shops across 5 branches. Unless the museum opens another branch of the Imperial War Museum, it's limited about how many more shops that we can do within that. So my challenge to keep pushing commercially to generate more income for the museum is to look at outside of the museum. So a key thing for me really over the next sort of 3 or 4 years is to start developing things like our online shop, potential for pop-up retail further, as this is proved as a successful example, and then also trade selling, so looking at other countries and other places where the ranges that we've developed, there are exclusive products that we can start trade selling those outside of our own organisation as well. So I think there are huge opportunities for us to then carry retail aspect of the Imperial War Museum outside of their branches, and also, again, just to elaborate further, the people who come to our museums, trying to engage with them further as they've left the museum, making sure that they come back to our online shop and visit us in the future when they maybe gone back to their countries, that kind of thing. So good opportunities there, I think.
One of the things that really impressed me when I went a few weeks ago, I went to see the Lee Miller exhibition, and I was really bowled over by the way that you had created a pop-up shop based entirely around Lee Miller as a photographer, and I wanted you to speak a little bit about the opportunities that present themselves when you do the temporary exhibitions and how you go through that process of creating a pop-up shop.
So the IWM London has a rolling programme of exhibitions, so every 6 months we have a new exhibition. And we have a dedicated exhibition shop, which has been designed, I think David was talking about the design of our shops in a similar way. It's very interchangeable, so all we need to do is reprop it and re-graphic it, and it suddenly takes on a whole new, and obviously put some nice new product in it, and then it takes a whole new kind of life of its own. So the latest exhibition we've had has been Lee Miller, which was a great success. So she was one of the first, well, basically the first female war photographer ever. So she was originally a model for Vogue. She was a muse, and then she decided she wanted to be on the other side of the camera, so started taking fashion photography, and then moved to war. She was a war correspondent photographer. So obviously it's all about photography. So the lines that did well were image-led. The exhibition catalogue did very well, as did this postcard book. Her images are absolutely stunning. So to make good product out of those wasn't too hard. So we had good things to work with. But the exhibition programme at IWM is really exciting, and I think that's one of the nicest parts of my job, and probably my team's job, in that it's constantly changing, so you're always working on something new. And also, we really make sure that when we do develop an exhibition range, it's not just about the range itself. We make sure we've got the right props in and that it's going to get displayed in the right way to continue the story from the exhibition that you've just been to see. And that's a kind of, like we've said before, that's a theme going through all of our shops, and making sure that whatever you've seen in the museum, you're seeing in the retail spaces as well. And they're not just an added-on extra, they're integral.
Can you give us any heads up on future projects?
Oh, yeah, we've got a good one.
Come on.
So, yeah, we've got one called Reel to Reel, which opens on the 1st of July. So that's a century of war film. So it's really exciting because we've got some really great loans, which I probably can't talk about now. But and the buying team who are at the back there done a really good job on a range. And again, it's one of those ones where you first start thinking about it and it could be really, really difficult. How are we going to do a range on Saving Private Ryan? But you delve into it, and before you know it, you've got a range. So and that's just from working with lots of different suppliers and really thinking out of the box.
Well, thank you both so much. I certainly have learned a huge amount today, and I'm sure everyone out there will agree with me and give David and Laura a round of applause, and thank you very much. And I think we've got some time for questions, if anyone's got any.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask you, you mentioned e-commerce briefly, but how important is e-commerce for you at the moment, and how important is it going to become in the balance of your retail split?
Yeah, I think obviously our retail is very branch specific, and the museum and visitor attraction sector is, people are visiting those particular places, and that's when they engage in the retail. So traditionally in the sector, the e-commerce is actually very, very small, and I was quite surprised when I came in from outside the sector how small. So for me, there is a lot to do in terms of developing the particular e-commerce platform that we actually have, but then also trying to kind of engage with our visitors once they've left the museum. We have a lot of foreign tourists that come, for instance, a lot of Americans that come to the Churchill War Rooms. They're really obsessed with Churchill, and they don't necessarily want to take away a book with them, a poster, a bust of Churchill, that kind of thing. So it's trying to make sure through our contacts with them, trying to kind of get their details and actually just sort of develop them as customers in the future. And actually one of the things we have done as part of the new shop concept in all of our branches now is we've put in a screen, well, 2 screens, one for print on demand, so people can actually go onto a print on demand site, which you can see a lot of museums, and order some of these posters as a print and have that sent to their home. But the other one is the online shop. So actually when they're physically in the museum, they may not want to buy a product, but they can go to one of these screens, input their details, buy one of these products and have it sent to themselves at home. And I think, again, it's taking on board some of the things that have happened on the high street, which is actually bringing your e-commerce into your physical shops, which I think is integral to the future of retail, really, because people want to buy in those different ways, and it's the same for us, really.
And I think the amount of exclusive product we've got, because we've done so much product development because we had to, because you can't walk around Pulse or Spring Fair and buy Spitfire things that you want. So we've had to develop quite a lot. So the range is, it's about, what is it now? 40% developed. So not everyone can do that, obviously. It depends on your buying power, but that has helped because we can put exclusive tags on things. And I know all the museums and galleries do this. I'm not looking at anyone over there. But yeah, so I think that's really helped.
Any more questions? Oh.
Kind of a question and a story, something I'd just like to share with you as well. Sorry, I was just wondering, with the Empire, is it specifically aimed at sort of, how can I say, the British Empire, the war? How can I say? I don't know how I want to say this, because it just seems like there was Indians who fought in the war, there was Africans, there was Arabs, there was also Australians, New Zealanders, and things. Is there a fair representation of that? Because my father's from the Yemen and he served in the Merchant Navy in British Aden at the time and things. And just looking back at his story and how we grew up, I have a half Irish sister and half English sister, and that was through the war and the love stories and things. And my father was an entrepreneur, and he started at the back end of the war, sort of the post-war, by selling rubber gloves and ladies' nylon tights that were coming over from America, and he had lots of friends with the American GIs and things like that. So I myself would love to go to the Imperial War Museum, but I'd be even more enthralled and more excited to go if I had a representation of that, and also of Liverpool as well, where we grew up as well, and in North Shields, and where the boats were built, and the camel led and all of that, and a lot of the steel that was created, that my father and some of his friends sort of broke their back, to help to make some of these Spitfires and some of these fighter jets and things. So I'd like to see a bit of the bigger picture, really, to be quite honest. I know there's lots.
Have you been to the museum?
No, that's what I'm saying. I haven't, but I would be more excited to go if I had that bit of my social history here in England, Liverpool, Newcastle, and more international. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we have had dedicated exhibitions on that kind of thing, and we have a dedicated bookshop which covers all of a large majority of the topics which you've talked about. Unfortunately, I didn't have a picture of the bookshop because we were talking about gift mainly. As for the exhibition programme, if you were to email the info, if you just go on the main page of IWM, they're always looking for new ideas for exhibitions, so there is an email address that you can write into. So, yeah, it's fine. We don't have much input into the exhibitions. That's led by a totally different department, but obviously we work together quite closely because we need to make sure we can do the retail side to them. But David and I, we're not responsible for what exhibitions go on. But that's a much bigger team. So, but I can put you in contact.
I think just to add to that, I suppose that the museum is changing as all museums have to, and re-looking at history and parts of history and the people that played a part in that history, and particularly I'd say the new First World War galleries that opened in 2014, you'll see a really big representation of groups that possibly hadn't been looked at or talked about. In 2020, we will also have new Second World War galleries which will do the same thing, and particularly a lot of online content. So the museum is definitely kind of looking at sort of new aspects of history, and a lot of those groups that haven't previously had things brought to light.
In the First World War galleries, it is covered. So.
Hello. I was interested in what you were saying about museums and galleries obviously now having to compete and up their game, and now we're competing much more with high street retail. In doing so, how do you monitor and police kind of where your brand edge lies in terms of the museum content? And I'm also really interested as to whether your exhibitions and curatorial team have a say in the products that you're producing as well.
I think just in terms of sort of IWM as a brand, obviously retail is almost a sub-brand as a part of a much, much wider organisation, and I think that's one of the challenges, but I find one of the most interesting parts of my job, which is I can't just go off and do whatever I want with the retail. It has to be as part of a message of what the Imperial War Museum stands for and what it's about. So in some respects, I find that actually makes it clearer for us because we know what it is that we can or can't do in the shops, and there are products that Laura talked about earlier that we would never put in the shops, and there are some ranges that we don't really sort of represent, we don't think represent what the museum is about. So in terms of sort of us setting a brand, it's very much within the context of the wider museum.
Yeah, and we take, we research, and if we're worried about anything, if it's an image or a bit of text, there's a team that we can talk to that in their job description are there to help the commercial units. So, because obviously we publish books as well, so there's that, we have to have those people. I think I touched on it before, but we get very few complaints. But we have had a couple, and one was on a product, and I looked at the complaint, and I looked at the product, and I thought, yeah, you're right, I'm wrong. And we took it off sale. It's that.
Thank you so much, David, Laura, and Katie. We've run out of time, but please do carry on the conversation on Twitter, hashtag SHOPTALK, and follow the Imperial War Museum as well. And thank you so much. Thank you.